Good day, good morning, grand rising, much blessings to everyone. I would really like to thank you for being in to share with us. I want to welcome my friend here. All
Hey!
right,
Hi, Aris.
great. Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm awesome. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Real good, real
Uh,
good.
are you doing a retreat right now?
I'm conducting a certification course now.
Uh-huh.
Yes. I'm in Panama,
Yeah,
right here on the island of Toboga.
Boga.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
so you're just taking time out right now to come and talk to me.
I'm taking time out to come and share with you and
Um,
our friends, our audiences around the world. I want to welcome everyone and present to those of you on my side that don't know who I'm sharing with. This is Cheryl Lee, a
hmm
good longtime friend. We go back many moons,
Many.
and yeah, so it's good to share with you. Where are you?
Well, in Seattle, basically, just outside of Seattle. So
Oh,
I'm in the
okay. You been what?
I'm in the ice box.
Well, it's thawing out. It's thawing out.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah.
but the goal is to get out of the ice box and come to where it's the fruits growing on the trees and the sun's on my back and earthing, putting my feet in the earth, that's the goal.
Okay, well, fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
So, so what in terms of where you are and the Earth? I know it's been a lot of stuff that has been happening up on that side of the planet. It's quite always active over there.
It's always active.
Yes. So what's happening on the food scene? Anything, going on in that area?
Well, we're coming to spring now, so things are slowly starting to trickle in because during the winter months here, there's really no farmers markets, like you might have to order from like miamifruit.com or something to get some. Otherwise, we're just subject to, like, not bad, but it's not going to be grown, ripened on the tree. It's probably picked green. So it's a little harder during the winter months to get fresh fruit and vegetables. So I just make a point to buy organic, and just do the best I can that way and just have a good variety, not eating the same things all the time, just making sure I have a lot of variety in my diet.
Yes.
And that,
Okay.
and making some things maybe in the winter months that are a little living, but a little heavier. But now, because it's getting warmer outside and the spring's coming, you just kind of intuitively just want to get lighter.
Okay. Great. Fantastic. Yeah, my a lot of what I do today, has been gleaned from work that's been published in that area. I don't know if you're familiar with the publisher. Well, I think they've closed down now after years of publishing rare and out of print books.
Uh-huh.
And they publish all of the books of the great raw food proponents for over 100 years.
Yeah.
People like Hilton Hotema, the Richters, many books that you can't find today in anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There are a handful of them that you could find in some of the big houses these days that they've reprinted, but still, we're talking, a storehouse of knowledge, and also especially knowledge as it relates to Natural Hygiene
Yeah.
Society,
Mm-hmm.
which was a big, forerunner to
Yeah.
what we're talking about today when it comes to to living food, to fresh food, plant foods, vegan foods, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that has to do with conscious eating from a
Exactly.
very profound perspective, it all came out of that area. You remember the name of the publisher?
Well, so it was back in 1998 when I went through the hygiene program. And
Yes.
that time I was reading Herbert Shelton, obviously Keith
Yes.
Fry, a big proponent of Natural Hygiene Institute. Bernard Jensen, read lots of Bernard Jensen, and we
Yes.
did lots of on, you know, Ann Wigmar and wheatgrass and all of that. So that was kind of my base, you know, coming into natural hygiene.
Yeah, you know, it's an old school that many people today don't even know has even existed,
Most people
period, you
say
know?
hygiene, they think you're talking about the mouth, like a hygienist or something. They don't know what it means.
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, so the major proponent, the big person that really did a whole lot in that movement is Herbert Shelton.
Yeah.
We're talking, this is the root of food combining.
Yeah.
You know, he has written specific books dealing directly with food combining. And then within my time, my contemporaries, you know, I met Dr. Jensen. We did a lot of programs together at the Whole Life Expo out in California and other places around the world. There was also Dr. Benesh. Dr. Benesh out of San Diego. But the person that I've done like really direct work with was Dr. Esser. Dr. Esser out of Lake Worth, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you know, the natural hygienists, they had the rest ranch. They didn't have retreat centers. They didn't have clinics or anything like that. They were known as rest ranch. They're basically, it's like healing sanatoriums, you know, where you would come and you definitely, you know, will leave out a whole lot healthier and heal of whatever you came there with. What has been your experience? I understand that you studied with one of my great contemporaries, Dr. Doug Graham.
Yes. Yeah. So Doug Graham was like, you know, when I made the progression. So you know, I first became, well, what we call like the vegetarian, but then I did become a vegan, and I encompassed that to what it means to actually be a vegan. So I was, you know, not wearing anything that was made from animals, you know, nothing on my skin. Like I was really careful about that. But then after that, then I progressed into raw food and really got into fasting. And that's when I really got passionate about wanting to learn more. And that's when I started looking into hygiene. And through that, I came across Doug Graham. And
Yes.
and at the time too, I was very athletic. So I wanted to have like do living foods, but I also wanted to excel in being an athlete. So at the time I was doing some marathons or training, that kind of thing. And so I hired him to help me train for that. And then through that, I ended up at his retreats in like Raw Stock in San Francisco.
Yes, yes.
I'm in actually Cedro Woolley here in Washington at his retreat. You know, spent 7 days a couple of times with him, but was always in touch with him. So he was like, read, of course, his book, 80-10-10. And I went all in. So,
Great.
you know, 10%, everything was exactly to a T. And it was really amazing. Like it worked so well for me. And then, you know, my kids were young at the time. And at that time, they were also doing living foods. And so I had my Excalibur dehydrator going around the clock and soaking and sprouting and everything. So it just kind of like progressed to the point where, you know, I was really living live foods, you know. So yeah, and I wanted to, so we're going to do like 4 different, like a series of 4, talking about some different subjects. And I thought maybe we could just share with everybody what those subjects are going to be and what we're kind of maybe get into a little bit today.
Oh, yes. Well, please go ahead. Let's
Yeah.
share with them for me.
So today I thought we were going to talk about starch versus fruit, and what the difference is, because I think there's a lot of confusion. You know, people, there's this fruit's got a bad rap. You know, a lot of people I talk to, they just say, you know, I can't eat fruit, and I especially can't eat fruit now because it's not like it was 100 years ago. You know, the apples are like this rather than like this. And so in their mind, they think that eating rice or potatoes or something like that is better because it's not sweet, and so it doesn't have as much sugar, and so it's somehow better for them. So I really wanted to speak about that because I think there's a lot of confusion, and you just do such an amazing job of breaking it down so people can really understand why fruit isn't the enemy.
Yes, please, please.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for really provoking this type of exchange, because
Mm-hmm.
it is very crucial. Because yes, fruit does have a very bad rap, and but you know, if you're coming out of school with Doug Graham, you know, Doug is a fruitarian. You know, for
Yeah.
the most part, most of his adult life that I've known him. And even myself, when I started off just eating all living foods for the first 2 years, I was in California, out in San Bernardino, in an area where it's all the big orchards, you know, Apple Valley and
Yeah.
places like that, where you would go and pick your own. It was all about fruits, and you know, the amount of fruits that was available, the variety, and then to see what has happened to it today in terms of some people even within this living food circle, you know, they really slam. There's also documentation of individuals within modern time that have healed themselves, even of cancer,
Yeah.
with fruit only, you know, fruit only. So let's go ahead and share what intake is
Yeah.
on the difference between fruits and starches.
So, like you say, you know, they're different. There's the simple carbohydrates and the complex carbohydrates, and I love it. Complicated, complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So when we take in starch, it's going to be complicated. When we take in fruit, it's going to be simple. And I think most people know that simple is better than complicated. You know, so just the word,
Yes,
just
that's
the
correct.
word, just the word that means something. You know, so I think taking that and then applying it to how's that going to show up in our body? How are we going to metabolize that? If we're putting something complicated in the body, it's going to take away. You know, somehow we're going to have to come up with extra energy to digest that, to process that, to metabolize it. Whereas if it's a simple carbohydrate, it's just simple. It's like a one and done. You're going to get the energy out of it. It's going to go through easy, pass through you. You know, we are going to be talking our third one about food combining, because that's going to be really important too when it comes to fruit, you know, especially if people are eating things with it, you know, and they're not eating it alone, because oftentimes that'll get a bad rap too. They eat a banana with something that's going to take forever to digest, and they, you know, so that's the whole other part. But I'm sure I know you feel the same way when it comes to differentiating between the two simple and complex carbohydrates.
Yeah, well, number one, you know, where I am now, I'm in Panama. And
Yep.
I was born here. I was born here in Panama in 1947. And I was born in the rainforest in a village called Gatun, on the Gatun Lake, which at the time was the former U.S. Panama Canal Zone. And growing up there, we're talking, I'm in the rainforest as a kid.
Yeah.
We're in the rainforest, And back then, you know, cooking was not as sophisticated as it is today. It was very exact, very direct. Yes, good traditional home cooked foods is what we had all the time. But year round, here is all of these fruits and tropical fruit, not just any kind of fruit, tropical fruits that are rich in sugar,
Right.
extremely rich in sugar. And so this area here is number one. It has the number one it's the number one bird sighting area in the entire world, where within a 24-hour period, the Audubon Society have cited more than 365 species of different birds.
Wow.
That are in this area. And consistently it's been number one, number two on this list for probably the past 40 years, for as long as they've been doing this bird count. They usually do it like on Christmas Day and a couple other days during the year. But this is an area that when I'm growing up, you know, as a kid, you see in the mornings, you know, it's like a whole big family or tribe, you know, a nation of birds just coming across the skies, you know, parrots and hawks and you name it, all types of different birds. And not only birds you find in this area, but bees, butterflies, and bats. So that's what I call the 4 big B's: birds, bees, butterflies, and bats. And wherever these 4 different groups of animals, you know, abound, it's full of fruits.
Sure.
Fruitland, you know, mangoes, papayas, all of the tree foods, they're all here in the tropics. So we ate tons of fruit. My entire childhood, tons of fruit. We ate very little ground provision. The potatoes, the yams, and you know, the tropical heavy complex carbohydrates.
Right.
So what I've observed over the years is that it's either one or the other. It's either fruits or starches.
Right.
The human body cannot harmoniously process both of those 2 different food groups together, even hours later.
Right.
You know, so since modern food culture have like really taken a deep dive into starches, most people grew up on heavy starchy diet today.
Yep.
So yeah, so if you start eating fruits with all of the starches that's been in your diet, then there's going to be some revolting going on inside of your system. And also, number one, what are starches? What are these complex carbohydrates? The subgroups under this grouping of foods are your grains. All grains, from the finest grain, the quinoa, the teff, the fonio, those little micrograins, to the large ones, the wheat, the oats, barley, and also the roots from the ones that are growing closer to the surface of the earth to the ones that are growing totally, completely deep down into the earth. We're talking more than 6 foot deep, you know,
right.
Way down there, you know, to pull out a piece of cassava, yucca, or tropical yam. You have to really dig deep. So these are starches. And then there's a third group that many people it doesn't even register in most people's consciousness that these foods are heavy starches as well. Your beans,
yep.
Your legumes, the dried peas, you know, we're talking kidney beans, black-eyed peas, black beans, all of these things. These foods are on average 70% starch and 30% protein. Many people, they just constantly talk so much about good protein foods, these beans, good protein. but it's twice the amount of starch. So when you look at those three groups, look at the amount of roots that we eat. Look at the amount of beans that we consume. Look at the amount of grains.
Mm-hmm.
But just go up and down the supermarket aisle.
For sure.
And you're going to see most of the processed foods in the supermarkets, in the natural food markets, grains, beans, and roots.
Yep.
Starch, starch, starch. And
yep.
they're very inexpensive, reasonable. So most people on a limited income, on a budget, they would tend to, rather buy, a pound of rice for, in some places, less than what it will cost you to buy one apple these days. So,
and then, like, people who are, because most of us, unless you're, have the fortunate, upbringing like you did, where you're actually exposed to fruit, but most of us in this area of the world, like places like Canada and Pacific Northwest, these places where maybe we were raised on starches. How do you feel like there with the addiction part of starch? Because I don't know anybody who is addicted to fruit. Not really. I mean, if you ask somebody if they're hungry and you say, oh, you know what, I've got a bunch of lettuce and celery here, do you want some? Or I've got a bag of apples. No, nobody will say. They're like, nah, I want to go get something, and it's usually got starch in it. So
that's right. Well,
about that and the addictive nature of starches.
Yeah, well, one thing about fruits, there's a word that you probably haven't even heard, and many people haven't heard in their vocabulary. There's a word that's called Clyde. When you have a Clyde to fruits, the body detects, you reach a certain point where the body has been saturated with the sugar from fruit, that there's a cutoff. It's like a shut-off valve, that you don't want any more fruits. But with starch,
I lost him. I lost your sound, Aris. Okay.
Extremely addicting. And the reason why is that they do not digest effectively in the human body, because practically 95% of all the starches we consume them cooked.
Yeah.
They are cooked. This is a group of food that is so difficult to enjoy raw in a living state.
And nobody would want to eat them raw. It's not, there's no enjoyment in eating a raw potato or raw wheat or whatever, so.
Yeah, so when you cook these foods, you destroy the digestive enzymes that are present in them that would actually assist in breaking them down and converting this starch, this complex carbohydrate, into sugar, into a simple carbohydrate. So generally, they don't digest effectively in the human body, and undigested starch ferments.
Right.
Fermented starch produces alcohol. So, and we know when you drink alcohol, you become intoxicated.
For sure.
So now when you're manufacturing alcohol yourself, from grains, from roots, from beans, now you're full of toxins. Yep. And it becomes addictive. It becomes addictive because when the body don't break down these foods, it tends to store them. Whatever the body don't break down, it tends to store. And later it's going to wreak havoc in our system. The dried starch would tend to calcify. It becomes very hard, very tough. They create accumulations in our system and inflammation. It's the kind of food that we use to stuff turkeys. Right? we make stuffing. So, and it's the kind of food that in human dietary consumption, there's the type of food that they call stuff, that they stuff you up. You feel stuffy when you eat them. They're highly mucus forming. So in this way, once they produce alcohol, of course, they're going to yield yeast. Wherever alcohol is produced, yeast is produced. And here we end up with yeast infection, candida, many other types of issues that are reflective of this type of food consumption. Dandruff is dried out starch flaking out of our system. And of course, today we see it's a direct correlation with many very intense diseases like diabetes, arthritis, kidney stones. This is accumulation of dried out starches in your kidney.
Skin conditions.
So on and on, you know.
Skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis, you know, that crusty on the surface of the skin.
Yes, even something as innocent as athlete's foot. What is an athlete's foot? You know, there's just like fungus growing out of, you know, between the toes of people who, back in the days where it came out as athlete's foot is because that was like during the advent, the big onslaught of the sneaker industry.
Right.
So anyone who wore sneakers, or back then we used to call them pumps, then they call them tennis shoes, the same thing. It's like your feet closed up, you know, for hours, 8 hours, 12 hours in this rubber. Most of them were made from rubber back then.
Yep.
They're not breathing. So we're talking easy reproduction of bacteria, fungus growths going on between your toes. So innocently, they would call it, label it as athlete's foot. And we think because we're athletic and we wear these shoes and, you know, we're moving up and down every day, that it's caused because we are athletic. But no. So it's interesting how certain labels get attached to particular conditions where you don't actually end up seeing the correlation between these conditions and what you're consuming yourself personally.
Yeah. And I just had a question here. Somebody asked, how do they detox the starch? How would somebody who's been eating starch for all of their life and they want to start moving that up and out, what would you suggest to help that process?
Well, it's a withdrawal process. It's sort of like if you go into a drug addiction center, you know. Yeah. And this is one of the things that natural hygiene specialized in, you know, really just detoxing people. You know, they would come, like you would go to Dr. Esser's restaurants, and Dr. Esser was a very avid tennis player when I met him at the age of 77. A very avid tennis player, very active. But you would come to his restaurant or his sanatorium with a particular disease, and they would put you to fast immediately.
Yep.
You know, and dry you out. Pretty much melt the mucus, draw it out of the system. You know, remove all of the stagnation, the calcification. So this is what we need to do. Number one, we need to hydrate it. This dried starch, these stones, they need to be hydrated. They need to become moist again. They need to get softened up. And of course, other foods or herbs and different spices even that we can use within our diet to be able to now start to break them down. But in my book, and in the book of Natural Hygiene Society, these healers or doctors, they were doctors, naturopathic doctors.
Yep.
You know, what they did, they would remove the carbs from your plate first.
Yeah.
So we need to cut back on the amount of starches that we're consuming. And of course, increase on the fruit consumption simultaneously. So you're going to get your sugar more direct now from the fruit. But of course, in this type of scenario, fruits are going to now basically be the healers. You know, as we hear that, you know, back in ancient days, traditional healers used to say, you know, thy food shall be thy medicine, and thy medicine shall be thy food. So on a mixed diet, such as, you know, the typical standard American diet, the SAD diet of heavy starch, heavy protein on the same plate, very little vegetables, then we see now that this has to be broken down.
Yep.
And the things that are going to break it down, once you remove the starch and increase the fruits are going to start breaking that starch down. It's going to start softening it up. And of course, your citric fruit, these fruits that are highly alkalinizing, because the starches are mucus forming, and they also acid.
Sure.
They're acid forming. They're not alkalinizing foods. All starches, in their nature, they're acid forming. There are a few naturally occurring alkaline, like in the grain group of foods. The millet is alkaline. Whether you cook it or whatever, it will not become acid forming.
Right.
And that's also what a lot of people get away with even eating a lot of rice. Rice is a neutral grain. It doesn't produce the type of acid reflux. That's why we can eat buckets of the thing and can tolerate it that much longer, you know, than we can other types of starches that would actually accumulate in the system. The rice kind of tend to pass through. And especially if it's brown rice with the fibers and things like that, it moves on through the system. But the acid tasting fruits, pineapple, plums, you know, strawberries,
oranges.
blueberries, excuse me?
I just said like oranges and grapefruits, those kinds
of
things.
Yes. Cranberries. Perfect. So these types of and then also hot foods or foods that generate heat, garlic, onion, the whole mustard fat, foods that have that mustard oil, you know, scallions and things of that, leeks, shallots, and of course, hot peppers and mustard greens as well, the bitter greens, you know, mustard greens and things. These are the foods that are going to come in now and start breaking it down. You know, the hot pepper, but of course the spicy hot pepper, fresh, not cooked.
Right.
Because, you know, peppers are fruits.
Yep.
They're fruits botanically, and we know every time we cook a fruit, it becomes acid forming. Practically 95% of all fruits, even the acid tasting ones, they all are alkalinizing. They become alkaline in your body. But the minute you cook them, you apply extreme heat to them, they all become acid forming. Exactly. So the difference between a fresh orange juice, the fresh orange juice is acid tasting, but it produces alkaline when it breaks down in our system. But if you pasteurize it, made from concentrate, then it's not only acid tasting, but also now it is acid forming. And this is where we end up with certain complications when we start eating processed fruits. And this is where the sugar even increases. Like simple thing like an applesauce. The applesauce, as opposed to eating a whole apple, eating a cooked applesauce that's been pasteurized, that's been cooked, is acid forming. You know, so we go through the entire science of nutrition when it comes to food combining, and we start seeing what happens to us when we have a high degree of starch in our diet. Starches do not combine well with protein. So the whole meat and potato diet is a bad food combination.
Yeah.
Starches, the complex carbohydrate, their main area of digestion is in our mouth. Chewing them, salivating them, infusing them with digestive enzymes. They're going to allow them will assist in breaking them down into sugar. So, and most of the starches that we're eating, the cooked, soft, mushy foods that don't even require much chewing, bread, potatoes, you name it, you know, mashed potatoes. These things don't require much, so we're not salivating them. We're not secreting the digestive enzyme to break them down so that they can turn into sugar.
For sure.
Undigested starches do not convert into sugar effectively. So we end up storing them, and where do we store them? We store them in fatty tissue, especially since practically all of the starches we consume, we always grease them. We lace them with some form of fat, whether it's butter, mayonnaise, natural organic plant-based, you know, what we call these things, hydrogenated oils. You know, like in my charger, so you can go ahead and continue on the same note while I plug in.
So I was just thinking too about what you just said about like, because a lot of people who might want to start incorporating in their diet, get away from the complicated carbohydrates. Maybe they'll think if they go to the grocery store and they buy some Tropicana orange juice, it's cooked and like cooked / pasteurized, that, oh, this is great, I'm getting more fruit. But what you just said about anytime you cook a fruit, even if it's applesauce, you know, that yes, it's fruit, but it's cooked. So now you're turning that alkaline forming fruit into an acid, you know. So it's really important to eat the food living, not dead. And when we cook things above 118 degrees, we're basically, the food's dead. It doesn't, you know, if you go to try and plant a cooked carrot, it's just gonna rot, you know. So I think that's a really
and also
some people
we're concentrating the sugar. We're actually concentrating the sugar when we cook. I mean, look at something as simple as maple syrup. The sap from the maple tree, it has not a hint that is so sweet when it's just fresh sap. But when you take that sap and boil it down to produce a syrup, concentrated sugar. So look at the sweeteners that we're eating. Look at even today, you know, the agave, the coconut nectar. Look at all of these processed sugars that have crept in to the whole vegan, vegetarian circle now. We're supposed to be eliminating processed sugar, and now we're getting these more sophisticated, you know, more health conscious sugar. And a lot of these people, they're bypassing the fruit, because with those sugars in your system, also fruit is going to create a problem. And they blame the problem on the fruit, not the sugar, not the processed concentrated sugar.
Exactly.
And it's the same clash that happens with starches and fruit. They blame the clash, the problem, on the fruit, not the starch. Look at a disease like diabetes. Someone with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, all the stuff about eating the processed sugars and things like that. And the doctor will tell you, yes, get off of refined sugar and get off of fruits as well. But look, the story is on, it goes on and on and on. These people diagnosed with diabetes and they stop eating their fruits, and 10, 15, 20 years later, the diabetes have progressed worse. To the point where now they got them life dependent on insulin, but they stop eating fruit. What is the problem, doctor? Why is it that you get someone off of fruit because you said there was a direct connection with the fruit and the diabetes, but yet the person progressively got worse to the point where you have to put that person on insulin? And you
Sure.
put these people in your medical institutions and you serve them macaroni. You save them potato salad. Where isn't there a starch connection to this, doctor?
Yeah. Well, they didn't go to the Natural Hygiene Institute.
Ah, yes, 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 yes.
Right?
And you know, another school of teaching that actually also did a very big disservice to fruit culture was the macrobiotic diet.
I was going to say that. That was the
Oh
one
my goodness.
that was just an absolute disaster, because on the macrobiotic diet, that's just all you're eating is starches, you know? I mean, that was just the absolute worst thing ever.
The worst, the
And
worst. Look, you're eating all these starches. So of course, if you put any fruit in there, it's going to be a revolution in your system. So in their literature, they totally lambasted fruit and talking about how fruits are not food for human consumption and anything of that nature. But the amount of brown rice they had you on, even the day after you eat a piece of fruit, that rice is gonna clash with the
yes.
fruit. Fermentation is gonna take place, and we're gonna have a lot of problem. But of course, the diet originated in Japan, and Japan is famous for exporting anything, everything. So it was a Japanese export that came to the West, you know, and no offense to the Japanese culture, the Japanese business, you know, model, but it was just another Japanese import. And what happened to it? You know, what happened to it? All of this processed soybeans,
Yeah.
beans and rice, beans and rice. What happened to it? And they told the diet as the anti-cancer diet. And the major proponents of the diet died of cancer. Michio Kushi and his wife, Aveline Kushi. And they had us very heavy on starches. Of course, most of it was imported from Japan, the brown rice back then. You know, the rice syrups, the midden, all of these types of things. But they did some good blessings to the world because they introduced us to seaweed.
Yeah.
We definitely have to credit the macrobiotic dietary system for introducing the world to seaweed. Because, you know, it came out of Japan because they had their land for agriculture is very minimal. You know, so they, of course, started farming the sea. And yeah, they have really done us a big service by popularizing and making seaweed a normal part of our dietary intake these days. But putting down fruits was not a righteous thing, because now we see it today. But look, let's go back to nature. Let's look at the facts of reality. Fruit trees, apple tree, peach, nectarines, mangoes, papayas. These trees are actually food factories. Every single seed from every single fruit can reproduce another tree. And these trees can keep bearing for you every year. You go to Apple Valley, you go to Peach Orchard and all these places out in California and other places around the world. And you see how fruits just keep coming in and year out. Very little work to do with the land. No tilling and replanting like we do with vegetables and things of that nature. You know, look at an avocado tree. You know, and of course, this is another thing also, is that when one say that they're fruitarian, the whole sugar panic button goes up.
Exactly.
But there's so many fruits that don't contain sugar as well. Of course, like the avocado. It's a fatty food. It's high in protein or rich in protein. But you can actually be a fruitarian and don't consume any sugar. No sweet fruits.
Absolutely.
The cucumber is a sugarless watermelon. But look at the seeds from a watermelon. Every single watermelon seed is another potential watermelon. We should have actually been overrun with food on this planet by now.
Yeah.
But of course, the food cartel took over our food basket.
Yeah.
So it's all about profit and greed. Look at what they've done. They've created this meal called a breakfast. And the meal is heavy with starches.
Yep.
Grains, the cereal, the cereal meal. Profit. And that's not the time of the day to be even eating cereal, starches, and the breakfast. That's the last thing your body needs is a bowl of cereal, a big bucket of granola,
Yeah.
oats and wheat and all of these things. These are complex carbohydrates. They're complicated carbohydrates. It's going to take hours for them to be turned into sugar. So you're going to spend your time during the day trying to turn your body into a refinery to make sugar from starches, from grains. So you're actually challenging the digestive system first thing in the morning with a cornmeal porridge,
You're
pancakes.
setting it to be complicated.
Complicated.
Complicated day.
Yes. But when we wake up in the morning, we have the sugar already available to us from what we've eaten the day before. And if you need any more sugar, basically fruits or simple, direct sugar that the body can absorb and utilize within minutes, really, within minutes. So to activate your digestive system so early, while the body during that time of the day, when you first wake up in the morning, your body is on an elimination phase. Your body is looking to empty the trash bin from the period that you spent sleeping, the 8 hours of fasting. You've generated certain waste. So the break fast period is breaking of the fast. It's not a meal, it's a phase. It's an 8-hour phase that you break in the fast from having slept at night and have your digestive system shut down. So you read any book on fasting, and when it comes to breaking the fast, it's totally unscientific to break a fast with organic granola. You know.
Somebody asked a question about waking up and having coffee. Coffee, and what are your thoughts on breaking your fast with coffee or tea?
Well, number one, coffee is a bean. Coffee is a bean. Well, of course, many beans are also fruits. Coffee is a fruit. The seed of the coffee, the bean of the coffee is an issue. I make coffee juice. I get fresh coffee beans, ripe, ready, fruit.
Sure.
And I just flash it in a blender with a little coconut water and press it out, and I get fresh coffee juice from the fruit, from the pulp of the coffee. We're talking brain food. We're talking, yes, high energy food, stimulating food without the acid.
Yeah.
The roasting of the beans, of the seeds of this coffee fruit is an issue. And according to Hilton Hotema, one of the great, well, Dr. Shelton's contemporary, the most accomplished raw foodist to date over an extended period of time, he calls cooking the fatal process. Of course, you're going to kill the food. You kill all the enzyme, all the life. And how you expect to get life from death? So once you roast the coffee, now you're in a whole nother league. It's a whole nother pure acid, and you have extracted the toxins from it as well. And we're going to have a problem. So waking up to a cup of coffee, no.
Okay, yeah.
You need to think, consider that this act in the morning of putting something into your body is a shower. It's an internal shower. Any liquid, the first liquid you're putting into your body, same like the first liquid you put on your external body, it's an external shower, then your internal shower. An internal shower with coffee, muddy looking water, you would not take an external shower if those water came out of the shower head looking like coffee. So why would you put that inside of your body? It's acid, it's irritating, and it wrecks your nerve, period. You know, so coffee, the way we deal with coffee, no, it is not food for human consumption. It is a drug. Just the act of roasting it is processing. Any processed food becomes dope, becomes a drug. Sure. So the whole act of cooking a potato, of frying it, that potato becomes a drug because the body doesn't recognize it as food. And that's why the body unleashes a whole army of white blood cells trying to attack this invader that has come into our system. So there's so much about the science. Yeah, we can give you hours. Yeah, but thanks for coming in. We got 3 more, you know, that we're going to be sharing with you on this level. So I think we should, if you have any other thing to add, it would be great. But otherwise, let's take a look at some questions.
Yeah, I've been actually I've got some questions here that I've made a mental note of. Somebody just asked how you feel about breaking the fast with dates in the morning.
No, that's a concentrated sugar. Dates are pretty much 95% sugar. It's concentrated sugar. To break the fast in the morning, yes, you do need fruits to break it, but you want high moisture fruit, the highest moisture possible, first thing in the morning. So I do coconut water. Well, that's my internal shower. It's not even breaking of the fast. It's breaking of the fast based on the traditional definition of the word fast. To fast means to hold fast, that really nothing goes past your lip. So the first thing that goes into your system in the morning, if it's just liquid, especially something like coconut water, you're actually not breaking the fast because it's not activating the digestive system. Exactly. When you put dates into the body, now you're activating the digestive system. So the body is not going to effectively eliminate and rid itself of the waste matter that was released during the fasting period while you were sleeping.
Right.
So because now you've activated the digestive system, and when the digestive system becomes activated, the elimination system does not work. The body cannot digest and eliminate simultaneously. So in the morning, you want to eliminate. So ideally, you want to come in with liquids and fiber.
Right.
Fruits, high liquid fruits, high fiber, watermelon, oranges, pineapple, apples, peaches, pears, nectarine, cantaloupe, you name it. No dense fruits early in the morning, no bananas, no persimmons, no dried fruits, no dates, no raisins, a cereal with raisins in it. Yeah. That's a bad food combination to begin with, starch and raisins, sugar and complex carbohydrate and simple carbohydrate in a concentrated form with very little liquid in there. That's, well, we see what has happened to humanity these days following that type of senseless way of eating. The world is sick. We're sick. The planet is full of disease.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so somebody asked the best protein for muscles.
The best protein for muscle. Mm-hmm. Hemp seed is 90% protein.
Okay.
Hemp protein, hemp heart protein, 90%. Of course, it has a big price tag on it. Who wants to build cheap muscles? Who want to live in an inexpensive body with materials that are not of high value, high quality, high vibration? Who wants to build those muscles with protein powder made of peas, green peas, and these types of things? you know, soybeans and these types of products. These products are going to bring a lot of complications to our system. But definitely, besides the hemp seed, other seeds and nuts, rich, high concentrated amounts of protein, sesame seed, pumpkin seeds, you know, even cashew seeds, almonds, walnuts, Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts are a powerhouse of protein. So build muscles with this kind of quality stack.
And so somebody asked as well, juicing your fruit and vegetables versus just eating them raw. Is
Well,
juice considered, they want to know if juicing is considered processing the food.
to a great extent, juicing is considered processing the food, but it's the type of processing that we would do in our system.
Right.
Basically, our teeth or the grinder blades in the juicer, the grinder blades that break the fibers and release the juice, release the water, releases the liquid. This is what happens in our system. Most of us are not chewing well enough. We need to break the fruits down into a very smooth mulch as possible. And when we put it into our system, our intestinal tract, that those 32 feet of that small intestine is like a squeeze bag. It's a juice press bag. And you're pressing but if you don't chew it well, if you don't break it down fine enough, if you don't triturate it, then it's not, you're not going to extract the juice. So the juicer, the blender, they're good helpers. This is where modern technology has scored big, you know, by introducing us to juice, the concept of juicing and blending. So we're actually bypassing a lot of our digestive process by juicing. So we get to let the digestive system don't get overworked. Because this is one of our biggest problems today. We have faulty digestive systems that are overworked. We've been trying to use them to do processing that are not necessary. Trying to process foods that are foodless, especially your complex carbohydrates, your grains, your beans, and your deep roots. Please, it's only been 10,000 years that we've been experimenting eating these groups of food. It's only been 10,000 years we've been eating corn. All the great variety of corns founded by the Incas in Peru, all the thousands of varieties of potato. This is only 10,000 years.
Yeah, exactly.
10,000 years of experimenting, and we cannot effectively process and digest starch in order to adapt ourselves to it. Fruits are time tested. They've been around for thousands of years. Thousands of years. But yes, of course, the chemistry has changed, the intensity has changed, but now you have to eat them within a different context. You have to be careful how you combine them. You should not combine them with protein. You should not combine them with starches, and even with vegetables. Fruits are to be taken alone.
Yeah.
Fruits are to be taken alone. We have one that is so high in moisture, the watermelon. 99% water, and all of your melon groups. There's a saying in the food combining system that melons, eat them alone or leave them alone. Yep. They're so high in moisture and they absorb within minutes in the digestive system. They require minimal amount of digestion because of their high moisture content. So it's the density of these fruits that are rich and concentrated that are giving us a problem today. Absolutely. And of course, a lot of the engineering, the manipulation, whether it's grafting or whatever has been done to hybridize a lot of these fruits, yeah, the sugar does register at a much higher level.
But, you know, you can also dilute it as well. You know, you can add, if you're juicing and it's a super fruit, you can always add coconut water, some water to it and dilute it.
Absolutely.
And somebody,
Absolutely.
when you're juicing, do you lose the fiber? And yes, you lose the fiber, but I think the point of doing juicing, and if you did a long-term juice, it's just to give the digestive system a break. It's not saying that fiber is bad and that we don't want to have fiber in our diet, but for the purpose of juicing, it's pre-digested. You're not invoking the digestive system at that time.
Yeah. Also, if we're eating salads, fruit salads, vegetable salads, whole fruits, we're getting quite a bit of fiber.
Yeah.
And if we're not eating the sticky, greasy, oily, pasty, gluey, gooey foods that don't have fiber, then fiber is not that much of an issue. We don't have to really eat trash to get fiber, you know, literally. And that's what they do. They have you eating wood pulp. You know, they call it cellulose bread. You know, your bread that's been stripped of its bran. The grain bran was stripped of it. Now they put cellulose, wood pulp, sawdust in it, so you can get fiber to move that through your system. Eating all living plant foods rich in fibrous foods, fiber is not an issue for us. So yeah,
Exactly.
we can expend and get rid of some of this fiber from the rich, bulky fruits that we may use by juicing it, and again, bypassing or not activating the digestive system to that extent, so that we can have more of the energy that we generate from the fruits to do other things. Because a lot of the energy that we generate from the consumption of complex carbohydrates, of starches and things of that nature, a lot of that energy goes back into actually processing the food itself. Hence,
Sure.
we end up with a loss. If we're looking at digestion as we look at it, our bank account, and to see the energy that is expended to digest protein, rich animal protein, and starches, cooked, complicated potatoes and things of that nature, it takes about a good solid 4 hours to digest any meal that's rich in these types of elements, animal protein and cooked starches. So if you're having 3 meals a day with these types of food, and even plant foods, plant protein that has been cooked, you're talking 12 hours of digestion.
Yeah.
For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 4 hours each meal. That's a lot of work for your digestive system. It becomes overwork. And then most of us that were not breastfed, our digestive system was developed faulty anyway in the first place. If you weren't breastfed 100% for a good solid 2 years, your digestive system was developed prematurely, and hence, this is what we're seeing today: leaky gut syndrome, acid reflux, a lot of digestive disorders based on, you know, not being reared in a certain way to develop a strong, vigorous digestive system, and then also taking that digestive system that you develop and abusing it by overworking it, trying to get it to break down some charred, roasted animal flesh. Call it barbecue or jerk or whatever you want to call it. The body was not designed, the digestive system was not designed to process that type of carcinogenic element coming into your body like that.
Yeah, for sure. And what about, I've had 3 questions about calcium. Foods rich in calcium to help with calcium.
Green leaves, green, rich, dark, leafy vegetable, parsley, big time. You know, collard greens, big time. Spinach, big time. But for you to access the calcium in these foods, once you cook them, it's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Calcium is gone, down the drain. Okay. And we're not grass eaters by nature. We're not cows and goats and horses. We don't break grass down like that in order to extract the minerals from them properly. So a juice extractor today, making green juice with rich, solid, green leafy vegetables, you're going to be getting your calcium. And of course, the seeds as well. The pumpkin seed, the sesame seed, high source of calcium.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Nuts, almonds, great source of calcium. So your green leafy vegetables and your seeds and nuts are good, excellent sources of calcium on this type of eating system.
For sure. And somebody wants to know your book. Can they find all of this information in your book that you wrote?
Well, the book that I've had out was a recipe book.
Okay.
So there's not much science in it, but the book on the science is coming. It's going to be published this year. Okay. But I have lots of information all over YouTube, Facebook, where I'm constantly expounding on this science, what I call the electromagnetic energies of living plant foods. We really go into it very deeply.
And what about fermented foods? I have 2 questions here. Are fermented foods good for digestion?
Fermented food is good for digestion if you're eating foods that are hard to digest.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so alcohol is fermented sugar. Rum is made from fermented sugar cane. And the more meat that you eat, the more rum you're going to want to drink. The more of those fermented beverages is going to help break down that flesh. And the more alcohol you drink, the more flesh you're going to want to eat anyway. They go hand in hand. So fermented foods are good if you're, putting in foods in your body that the body cannot process on its own. So that's why the Germans, those great food engineers, that's why they put sauerkraut in a hot dog.
You bet, yeah.
The fermented cabbage is to have an increase of digestive enzyme that helps to break down the bad food combination of the protein and the starch, the meat, and the complex carbohydrate, and even like wine with cheese. The wine, it helps break down that cheese, and back with the meat, alcohol needs something to cook. So the more alcohol you drink, the more rare you want your meat. Otherwise, it's going to cook your liver. You got cirrhosis of the liver. So they go hand in hand. But living on the level that I live on, 100% plant foods for the past 53 years, no animal foods whatsoever, no foods from animal origin, not even honey, vomit, regurgitation from the bee's system. And for the past 47 years, all 100% sun-fired foods, which many may call raw food, but foods that are cooked by the sun, that we don't cook the sun out of it. 47 years, look, fermented foods are not necessary in my system. All of my foods are easily digestible, so I don't need a digestive aid. And most of the digestive foods that you see around here today that have been coming, it's papaya anyway. It's papain.
Exactly.
Digestive enzymes are made from, look, the meat tenderizer. Look at your bottle of meat tenderizer. If you got one in your cupboard right now, pull it out. The #1 ingredient, papain.
Yeah.
The digestive enzyme from papaya that is used to tenderize meat. So you can imagine putting these types of food in your system, you're going to stay tender. At 75, I'll be 75 in a couple of months. At 75, I'm not sick. The type of food that I eat, 100% plant food, 100% non-cooked plant foods, and a high amount of fruits and no starches in my diet. No complex carbohydrate, no rice, no potatoes, no beans.
Somebody says, ask Aris to speak about his retreat in Panama.
Yes. Well, actually, let me take this opportunity and share with you where I am right now. I think this is a good opportunity to share with you. I'm at the Sun-Fired Culinary Institute right here in Panama. This is our retreat center here. And this is where we teach you how to sun-fire your foods, not cooking the sun out of your food. We should get through the rest of this with me just giving you a quick little tour, you know.
Yeah, that's
very little spices, you know, and we're talking spices and herbs. Very little processed food here in our kitchen. You know, some superfoods, but this is what we use to teach. You know, some dried herbs and spices. We do have some grains here. We do. I think we have two peas here. We have the chickpeas, which we sprout to make hummus. Big difference when you sprout it. And we have the peanut. The peanut is a pea. It's not a nut. So we show you how to work with it as a pea, but lots of nuts, lots of seeds. There's our hemp seed. We got sea moss and things of that nature. Our refrigerators are full, you know, and the retreat center, we're on a very small island in the Pacific Ocean of Panama. So this is our view right here. I think the island is just 2% populated. It's only 1,500 of us live on this island here. We have our slant bed. So yeah, the flyers that I'm posting about the retreats that we have a beach life retreat where you just come and hang out here on the beach of the island of Tobago. Here's our rooftop living room.
Wow.
Rooftop living room here. So this is your this is where you're going to live when you come here during the day. We have our coconuts here. Always have abundance of coconuts. And there's our beach. There's our beach. And way in the background, there is Panama City. Way in the background. We have all these ships, even cruise ships that are lined up. This is the entrance to the Panama Canal. And you can see above me, it's all green. And the island is only 5 square miles. So it's a little village still. So this is it. This is where you would come to.
Wow.
You know, but I'm gonna go back to my charger here so we don't lose our signal.
There's lots
but just, you know, give me
beautiful this is.
Yeah, we do have a little library here. I have a master library. I have a few natural hygiene books. This is one of my top natural hygiene books. Nature the Healer. Yeah, I got Herbert Shelton, the food combining, Introduction to Natural Hygiene, T.C. Fry, Dr. Anderson, and a few raw food books. We got books in Spanish and so forth and so on. But, you know, I'm still a information. I'm still an information person. I still do a lot of reading, lots of researching. I have a library of over 12,000 books.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, let me flip this camera back around here. Okay, here we go.
Somebody's asking about best books on natural hygiene, and I would definitely point them in the direction of Herbert Shelton for sure. He has a series.
Absolutely.
You know,
yes. Absolutely.
Okay,
so look, I'm gonna need to check out. I'm fasting. You know, I do a lot of fasting. I'm fasting, and already, what is it now? It's 11:20 here. I've already drank a half a gallon of juice, so I need to go drain out my tank here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna meet again next Sunday at the same time, and next Sunday we're gonna talk about fasting.
Oh, great, fantastic. Okay.
So, on the chat can bring their questions, think about them for the week, what they've got, and we'll meet again, same time, same place next Sunday, and the theme will be about fasting.
Okay, thank you so much, Shirley. You know, it's great reconnecting with you, and looking forward to hosting you, and lots of our guests today too. Looking forward to hosting you here in Panama. You know, we have a beautiful spot in paradise here, so you know you're welcome home.
I'm coming back home.
All right, nice, nice, nice.
We'll see you next Sunday.
Okay, family, much love. Okay.
Bye.
You're now live. Okay, I am now.